chapter 8, right? So yesterday, I think we reached, let's see. Right, yes, we've reached here, endpoint protection, and we talk about endpoints being the host, yeah, you're available in your um, local area network. Yeah. So endpoint protection, as we mentioned, we have, I think we all know because we used PC before or laptops, right? So example, Windows operating system, Windows 10, for example, have Windows Defender, and it includes uh, many different um, protection mechanism, that helps you um, to protect, um, because endpoint is where your network, okay, interfaces with the user, and sometimes user themselves are the, the vulnerability. Okay, apart from attack from outside our network, via remote. Yeah, remote, that means when your network, local network, is connected to the internet, right? So we expect the attack coming from the internet, but don't forget, right? The endpoints of your network is also vulnerable, right? So different kind of vulnerability. Nevertheless, even if the types of attacks are different, slightly different, because from the endpoints, that means the user themselves can introduce security breach, yeah, right? Whether intentionally or unintentionally, right? So let me just quickly just go to security and just show you very quickly, before we move forward, what I mean. So example, this is for my computer, right, under Windows security. Okay, I think you guys have seen this before, so you can see that there are multiple uh, areas that, for example, is provided by your operating system, various measures that is taken by your OS to protect your um, personal computer, right? So your personal computer is an example of an endpoint, right? So you can see host-based firewall, your account, that means authentication, yeah, and then virus and threat protection, including virus, including malware, right? And another point of access vulnerability is your application that you install, okay, whether they're safe or unsafe, yeah, and also browser allows endpoints to access the internet, yeah. So browser protection, your physical device security. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, yesterday, I think, yeah, that the new version of Windows 11, introduced more secure environment, okay, computing environment, with the introduction of, or the requirement of TPM, TPM. It's so much that Microsoft is not allowing uh, older PC, okay, without TPM version 2, I think, yeah, to upgrade, yeah, to Windows 11. Right, the device performance and health basically looks at your components, yeah, right, and family. That means if you share with family, to prevent, some family members accessing, um, unsafe areas on the internet, basically. Yeah. So there's a lot of coverage here, yeah. So this is what we talk about when what we mean when we talk about the endpoint protection. Okay.
So forgot to
Yes.
record.
Yes. Sorry. I'll start to record. Anyway, this is a recap from yesterday. Yeah. Anyway, I'll record. Sorry. Right. Okay, so this is okay. So when we talk about endpoint protection, we are thinking about that just now, yeah. And different OS have different levels of protection and coverage. Um, and some users, they tend to go for third-party protection rather than the built-in OS. Okay. Right. So we start today with the next slide. All right. Cisco email security appliance. Right. So this one, we know that from our previous course, we talk about all the application layer application that able to access. Basically, it's a network aware application. Yeah, able to access remote servers. Okay, so one of the application is the email application, right? And there are I think three protocols but spark under email. The first one is when the client, right? The client application sends email, right? To be forwarded to recipient. Okay, so the protocol that is used for that is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. Okay, so in order for your email client to talk to your email server in order to forward your email, okay, so your email client will connect to your email server using Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. To download email, yeah, from your own inboxes from server to your email client, you'll be using either POP3 or uh, IMAP, right? Okay, so email is one of the source of vulnerability because email allow attachments, and attachments can include executable. That means software that can be executed, so it can run inside your machine, right? Right. So and so we need a way to protect our endpoints where the email client resides, okay, by protecting our email operation. So Cisco ESA is there to monitor this to provide the protection for your email, right? So and this is a service from Cisco lah. So Cisco is ISA, or email security appliance, is constantly updating, okay, with real-time feeds from Cisco Talos. This system detects and correlates threats solution by having a worldwide database monitoring system. So what do they monitor? Usually they can recognize attachment threats, yeah, okay, when they detect a form, because we all know that this virus can be forwarded very easily by people, right? And sometimes software can forward to using a mailing list, can forward very quickly to multiple people. So if you send to one, probability is 50-50 that the person will activate the attachment. But if you send like a spam, send to 100, then the 100 people, for example, then the probability of um, some of these people get infected getting higher, right? Right. So because it's automated, sometimes this mailing program used by hackers, right? Um, automated. They, as long as you have a list of emails that you probably get from somewhere, right? So you can set very easily, quickly, and effortlessly, yeah, send um, compromised emails to um, hundreds, thousands of users, right? Very easy because you use software. So this service, right, is effort by Cisco, and is centralized. The part by detection database is centralized. So that means as long as you use their appliance, this one, okay, to protect your emails, then the protection is distributed. Means to say, once a threat is detected and is entered into their database, and all this will be all these SR devices will receive an update and they will in real time. Okay, that means this will basically reduce effect by 0-day attacks. 0-day attacks means um, when an attack is discovered, okay, it's new and it's discovered immediately. But like today, you receive information about an attack, then the faster you respond to it and provide a way um, to protect yourself, okay, against this new attack. So 0-day attack, basically new attack coming out in the first day or first few days or first week, rather than been going on for maybe several weeks or several months, right? This is new attack. So having real-time access to this monitoring system means you are protected in real time, right? So Cisco ESA, okay, functionality wise, it can block known threats. Means once the researcher detect an attack and the modus operandi of the attack, then they will update the database. Then the database, of course, will push this information into the ESA device, and ESA device will now be able to look out for these new threats. So block known threats. Okay, so known threats means the security people have already identified, okay, and analyze and find out a way to recover or to block these threats. So block known threats. Okay, remediate against stealth malware that evaded initial detection. So what happens if a malware is a stealth malware, it's penetrated your system? So what can be done after that? So this is the second functionality. There are several things that this ESA device is able to do once it detected a stealth malware that has already penetrated. Block it and probably destroy it if it's possible, and also remove or isolate the stealth malware, right? It similar to checking for spam emails. Emails that's carrying payload will be discarded, will be detected before it reach the email client, right? Before it reach the email client. So if it's detecting SMTP, means it is detecting at the point of sharing, at the point of sending out, right? So it doesn't even get a chance to, travel from one email server to another email server, right? It stopped at its track. So before it's even had a chance to be sent out, because SMTP is sending new emails, right? So it can actually scan and identify and detect, and if it finds that the particular email is a bad email, bad emails here means it has attachment, it has links to known, okay, known bad email server, not email server, sorry, web server, where you can find malware, then it will discard those email, quarantine it, and maybe even place it under a different, not inbox anymore, or send box, discard this email. Block access to newly infected sites, because due to the database monitoring in real time, the moment it's detected, then these sites becomes blacklisted, right? So immediately it's updating the blacklist for blacklisted URL. So when any user attempt to access those sites, blacklisted site, because they are infected with malware, or it actually has vulnerabilities, then basically effectively disallowing access, so the user don't even have to know, right, whether those sites, because uh, when they try to access, it's blocked. That means usually you will see a warning on the web page, right? It's redirected. You're redirected instead of the URL you want to visit, which is the affected URL. You will be redirected and shown a message, okay, informing you, right? Another thing that is for security in a way, preventing eavesdropping, okay? Email by default is plain text. Means people can eavesdrop into your email, can view and can change, right? Can change, right? Because the way email works is not instant messaging, meaning it will be forwarded from one email server to another email server before it reach destination email server. So along the way, it can be compromised in the sense that either people can eavesdrop onto your email messages or people can change or update or modify, right, the original message. So uh, encrypting emails, okay, content is a way to prevent that. So the last functionality there you can see in the list is encrypting content, right? Okay, so as we continue, it is so we call this Cisco Web Security Appliance as a mitigation technology. So just now we talked about email, now it's about solely about web. So mitigation technology, it helps because if one of the issue with endpoint is because you have the web client there, a web browser, which can access web server, right? Web server, and some of this web server probably belongs to hackers, and it's already um, filled with vulnerabilities that can attack your machine, right? So one way to do that is to mitigate this problem, okay, before the user is able to access those websites, right? So sometimes we use blacklisted URL. Sometimes we actually scan, right? So that means when you request a web page, right, it will be filtered via this web security appliance. So before it reach your machine, it's reach the security appliance machine. And what happens there is that the the software there or the service there will scan for any malware or any software that is considered as a security threat lah, including malware, right? So because it can do that, sometimes it can also be used to enforce the company's policy. What can be downloaded, what can be uploaded, what is allowed to view, what is not allowed to view. So that means you now have management control over what your employees can access, right? The thing is, this is very important for certain areas of business, right? Especially businesses where the confidentiality and also the safety of customer data is paramount. Yeah, I can give you a very good example. Is, for example, banking network, right? The internal network where you have to protect your customer data, not only in terms of security or loss, but also from that being stolen by hackers, right? So this is basically a filter. It works like a filter in front of your users against the internet sites. So Cisco WSA is able to provide complete control, management control over how their employees or users access the internet. Okay, so anything to do any service that can be accessed via your is considered to be internet services, like chatting, messaging, video, audio, um, can be allowed or disallowed. Restricted by time, meaning only a certain time period can be used or not. Even bandwidth limits, right? So that means you can throttle the bandwidth for certain traffic, right? For example, you notice that your employees like to go to YouTube and stream 4K video, for example. So it's using a lot of the bandwidth of the company. So you say, oh, you might want to restrict to the bandwidth, right? So no longer that means the user cannot monopolize the bandwidth, okay, for certain sites, for example. right? So all these are company policies, different companies, different policies. But the fact is, if you want to implement this kind of policies, Cisco Web Security Appliance can allow you as a company to do that, right? So I mentioned about blacklisting URL filtering, malware scanning. Malware basically software that you user might accidentally download. Yeah, okay. URL categorization, so which means category of URL you allow or don't allow. So for example, you might not allow maybe porn URL, porn links, okay, because it's a business computer. So all this kind of URL are categorized. Yeah, entertainment, IPTV. Maybe you don't allow IPTV, websites streaming, okay, streaming data to enter your network, right? Because it's work network, so they shouldn't be watching Netflix, for example, right? Web application filtering, encryption and decryption of web traffic, right? So all these are the functionalities provided by Cisco Web Security Appliance. Now, Cisco is not the only one that provides this kind of services, right? If you notice that our university, for example, is using FortiGate Web Security Appliance. Okay. All right. So any question on this so far?
No.
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 No. All right. Okay. So let's look at access control now. Okay, access control. One of the access control is to control access to a certain service. So a certain machine to your allow access to your network, right? So one of the way to control access is using authentication, right? Authentication simply is a way for the system to know uh, are, are you allowed, okay, allow access or not, right? And this authentication may be used various methods, okay? But the most standard one is using password because the idea is that if you are allowed to go in, you already have an account with us, and part of your account is the password, right? The password that you and only you should know. So in order to verify whether you are you, you should know what is your password. Okay, based on the idea that you will not show or share your password with someone else who is not authorized. Okay, so this is the basic idea of authentication lah, to identify the user so that the system can decide whether the user can access or not services, network, and so on. Right? So here we talk about authentication locally. The means the password is stored locally. Maybe if you want to access a machine, the password is stored inside that machine, right? So when you type in your password to authenticate, okay, the machine is you can use the local stored password and compare with the password that you entered. Obviously, it will be more sophisticated than that. Usually, we have one-way encryption, so it means even though the password is stored locally, um, anyone else who have access to that password, maybe administrator, will not, when they look at the password, they cannot know what is that password because it's actually encrypted one way, right? So when you enter your password, then your password is also encrypted one way, and the resulting string, okay, authentication token, when you compare, it's the same. That they know, okay, the password is the same, but they don't know what password, what is the password. Only the user know what is the password, right? Okay, so many types of authentication can be performed on networking devices, and each method offers varying levels of security. So far, you already configured done a basic configuration on switches and routers, right? Okay, these are networking devices, and the password and also the encryption that you basically did on switches and routers is those are for authentication. Means you are an administrator that you can access, you're allowed access to that particular network device, right? By knowing the password, right? and so you are allowed to perform the configuration. When you can go in means you can do configuration, right? So it's as I said before, standard way or the simplest way to authenticate is using login. Usually login is like login ID, login username, and such thing, and the password. Okay, linked to that profile. Okay, so far, you know you have set password on console, right? Means you connect to your device using console port, and then the moment you connect, in order to proceed, it challenge you for authentication, right? VTI lines for terminal connected connection. Auxiliary ports we haven't done, right? But there are auxiliary ports on the uh, network device as well, right? Now the thing is, if you are remotely, whether console or remote access via management VLAN into your switch, if you're just using a normal terminal connection, and usually it's a terminal connection, yes, you're authenticated. But the thing is, your communication between you and the device is unsecured. If you're directly connected using console cable, console port, well, the security is physical security. Okay, you and only you can physically access the network device, whether switch or router. But if you have enabled the remote, that means it could be done via network. Okay, and you might not be physically close to the network device, but you might be somewhere network, maybe in a local area network or even outside outside of the network, right? Then terminal access right, is unsecured. You know why? Because it's plain text. The communication between you and the network device, although you are authenticated, but the communication not secured because if drop, okay, if drop or middleman in the middle attack can happen because your communication is plain text, meaning people can capture your packets and open up and look inside. Okay, so a secure one will be encrypted version. Encrypted means the messages flowing between the administrator and the network device not only is authenticated, right, to allow access, but once the communication happens, the communication is encrypted. So, you know, other users or other person want to access by using middle man in the middle attack cannot do it because when they try to open the packets, it's encrypted. The data inside is encrypted. So that's why we always, if you allow remote access to your network device to access your network devices, you must use secure shell. It's an encrypted version of the terminal access, right? Okay, and also another thing, it provides accountability. Accountability simply means you are accountable for what you do when you have access to the network device. Whatever you are doing inside the network device is recorded, or in a computer speaker is logged, right? So this provide accountability. If some setting would change and you want and someone else want to know what you did inside there to make the changes, they can see who is that someone that well, basically log into the network device and perform the changes, right, or remove a certain configuration, right? So it's a provide accountability because you can trace who did what and when, right? Okay. All right. Right, so it says there administrator forgets the username password for that device. What happened? Okay, so there are ways, but this one I think there are ways for Cisco devices. There are certain uh, ways that you can not recover, but uh, you know reset. reset it back to default setting. Yeah. All right. So uh, again, why we say it's local password, because the password is stored in that network device itself. So let's say switch one. So when you apply the password is stored in switch one, right? Then you go to switch two. When you authenticate with switch two, the password that is used to authenticate you is stored switch, isn't it? Right? So this that means it's a database is locally stored. So local database method has a limitation, right? Okay, as what I mentioned, user account has to be configured, and what you have been doing with switches and routers currently, must be configured locally on each device. It's okay when you have one or two devices, or three, even three or four, but in a network, in enterprise network, where you might have, you know, tens and hundreds of network devices, suddenly this becomes very daunting for you to remember the password, right? And to physically, you know, and one of the, one of the what do you suggested, okay, good practice in terms of password is that you change your password every certain period, right? But imagine if you have hundreds of network devices and they all have password. Imagine the kind of time you have to spend to do that. So it's not scalable. It's maybe workable for if you have a small network, but if you have enterprise networks where you have hundreds of um, network devices, simply I cannot imagine lah, right? Can you imagine doing the configuration, putting in password, and if you use the same password for all your device, and an attacker get your password, they can access all, right? So it's better to have maybe different password for different switches. Again, it's a nightmare lah. It's not scalable, right? And there is no fallback. There is no secondary authentication method, just the password, right? Okay, so here at the side here, you can see the configuration that you have done before, okay? Right, and in this example is for routers, but it's the same for, I believe, for switches as well, right? So this is what we mean. What the security you've been doing so far, because you're doing on small networks, a very trivial network topology. So this is stored locally. So it's using local database for the password. Okay. All right. So what is the solution if you want to be scalable? Well, you have a centralized database to store authentication information, like a server, and all the devices, if you wanted to, access, will connect to that central server, okay, to retrieve your authentication. So rather than having uh, password spread over all the devices, it's all centralized into one single location. So this basically uh, is a better way to implement security on larger networks or enterprise networks. So let's look at these AAA components. Okay, these AAA components basically the kind of security. If you want to say you want to provide security, these are the three A's that you need to think about and provide if you, in terms of security, right? It's called AAA because it stands for authentication, authorization, and accounting, right? These are the access control. These are the three primary access control functionality that you must have, right? Okay. So you see the example given is credit card lah. So authentication basically authenticate you to that device. Authorization simply means once you have access to the device, what are you allowed to do and what are you not allowed to do? Do you have full access, partial access, or access to only certain things, right? So that is authorization. What are you authorized to do? Okay, after you're authenticated. Authentication means you can access the device. After accessing the device comes authorization. Authorization simply means once you access the device, what are you allowed to do and not allowed to do? Then the third A is accounting, right? So all that you are doing on that device is recorded, is logged, right? So there's a trace, okay, a trace for management to see, okay, what happened to the device, uh, by whom, on which date, time, right? So to summarize, AAA is a way to control who is permitted to access a network, which is authenticate. What they can do while they're there, authorize. And to audit what actions they perform while accessing the network means keep a log of it, right? With timestamp. And that is accounting. Okay. So let's have a look at the difference between how local and server-based implement AAA authentication. So local AA authentication, this method, as I mentioned earlier, they store the username and password locally within the network device itself, Cisco router switch. Okay, authenticate the user against that particular local database, right? So this usage is suitable for small networks because it's achievable by the network administrator. Only a few, so you don't mind configure. That's it, right? On a larger network, you prefer server-based AAA authentication, right? So when you're using this kind of authentication, this kind of security for your network, right? When you try to access the router connects to a central AAA server, and your credential is actually stored in that central AAA server. So the router simply just, when you're trying to authenticate the user, get the user profile and compare, right, against what you type, right? So the AA server contains all the username password for all the users, okay, that is allowed access to the network. So what do they use? They use for router, it use remote authentication dial-in user service, which is which normally known as acronym RADIUS, RADIUS. Okay, it's an acronym of Remote Authentication Dial-in User Service, right? Or another alternative is Terminal Access Controller, Access Control System, or TACACS Plus. Okay, protocols. These two are protocols that you can use. Okay, inside your router. You can enable which one you want, right? And the router use these protocols to communicate with the AAA server. Remember, whenever your machine have to talk to each other, they must agree on a protocol to use so they can understand each other. So this means these two is options for a way for your router to communicate with your AAA server in order to get authentication information, right? So this one contrasts with this small network, and when you have enterprise network, so enterprise network is larger, therefore your network devices, there are more. So in order to prevent going to each one, tedious, take long time, not really that secure, I think. Okay, you might mistype password, right? Whereas the centralized server-based AAA is better because all the user and password, you only need to secure this, right? And because they're all will access here to perform authentication. All right. Right. So this is local AAA authentication that you've done before, just a sample. Right. So if you're using the AAA authorization, it's automatic, does not require users to perform additional steps after you authenticate them. Right. Then authorization is automatic. It will just it's like a normal authorization level. For example, in our OS, once you log in, right? If you're administrator, then you can have access to everything, right? Like in your Windows. But if you're a normal user, right? Okay, you're not administrator. There are certain things you're not allowed to do. For example, maybe you're not even allowed to install any additional application, right? You might not be able to access another user's directories. Okay, these are the authorization. Authorization governs what users can and cannot do on the network. Okay, and similar to attributes. Okay, that we find in OS. Okay, whether you can, let's say, authorization to use a file. Maybe you can view a file, but nothing else. Or maybe you can allow to view and edit a file, nothing else. Or you can allow to view, edit, and delete a file. Or you're not allowed to edit, delete, rename, or whatever, but you can execute a file. Maybe it's just executable. So these are called attributes. What you can, is it read only, read and write, or execute attributes for that particular file. So similar with the network services, there are attributes that is solely focused on network services that you can set the authorization whether you allow the user or not. Okay, so these are called your privilege. What are your privilege? Privilege simply means what you can do, right? What you cannot do is called restrictions. You are restricted from doing that. So then disallowed, right? Privilege, what you're allowed to do. Restriction, what you're not allowed to do. Okay, so this is comes under authorization, the second A in the triple A. Okay, next we look at accounting, the third A, right? We talk about having accountability, right? Because in a business network, right, a critical network, you want to know, part of the security is that you want to know what the administrator has done as well, because um, if not, who audits the administrator? Okay, I'll give you a example. For example, in a banking, right? Banking, right? If certain people are not audited, they can misuse their access in order to do criminal things. You never know, or steal data or things like that, right? So in network also the same, right? They must be accountable for everybody, including the network administrator, right? So even the network administrator is audited by someone else to ensure that the network administrator is actually not doing something hanky-panky, right? Sometimes it's very useful also for troubleshooting lah, right? Because if you have a log what you did, maybe it's not something bad, but maybe it's a misconfiguration, and then something happened lah, because of your misconfiguration, maybe certain services not working, right? So accounting can provide that information, what you did at what date and what time, right? So you can see that sometimes it's also, that's why accounting sometimes is audit, sometimes is billing, right? Billing. So billing for certain kind of businesses, certain services, including network services, okay, is provided by the IT department, right? And IT department will charge other departments for use of IT facilities, including networks, right? So in I think this is a way to justify or balance the budget allocated to IT departments. Because if the IT department, there's no other way for IT departments to actually generate their income. If you think about it, if you don't have IT departments, if all these services is actually um, you get it from outside third party, means you still have to pay those third parties, right? So instead of paying the third parties, you're paying your IT departments, yeah, your data center or your IT departments, right? So in that way, they can show their value to management, right? Oh, okay. So in order to track the usage of the resources, including networks from other departments, you have accounting, and you can then bill for whatever you deem you want to bill, right? So it could be bandwidth use, similar to how your ISP right now is billing you, right? They give you a quota, right? So in fact, um, if you want to build network services, means you can also build the quota used by other departments, right? Even inside your own company, right? So these are some examples, right? Start and stop connection times, executed commands, number of packets, number of bytes, and so on, right? Okay, so it says here primary use of accounting is to combine with AAA authentication. Okay, once you authenticate, you know the person that is using the service, and then you want to know what is that person doing, right? So accounting combined with that means you have a detailed log. What is the authenticated user actually doing, right? Configuring or whatever. Okay. So what normally is captured by the log? Okay, so usually the username, date and time, the timestamp, like this one timestamp, and what is the command you have keyed in, typed in, right? As I said before, sometimes or most time this is for security, but it's also helpful for troubleshooting. If you have misconfigured, you look back through the logs. You yourself can view the logs if you're allowed, right? And check what commands you have entered, and from there detect what is the misconfiguration, right? And of course, the main purpose is also security. So it can become a forensic information, forensics evidence. Okay, if you are doing infosec or information security, one of the one of the topic that you're going to learn is forensic, meaning keeping track or finding traces or evidence, digital evidence of what crime has been conducted, right? And this forensics evidence can be used in court later on if you are going to prosecute the criminal who have done the, let's say they hack into your system, right? So if you want to say, oh, this person, we know he is the one, and then you cannot simply call the police, and then when you reach court, you have to provide evidence. You have to collect digital forensic evidence, right? And one of them is these logs, right? This log indicates who entered when, what they did, at that and timestamp. So if there's any malicious action done, you can easily trace who did what. All right. So far, okay, everyone.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Hmm. Okay. So yeah. All right. Okay. So let's look at this IEEE standard, which is IEEE 802.1X. All right. Okay, so this standard is a port-based access control and authentication protocol. Port-based. Port-based means authenticate you when you connect to your network device, right? So it's a way for you to only allow certain hosts or workstation to plug in. Plug in, connecting to a LAN means you plug in, right? We have similar access control for Wi-Fi, right? We use the WPA2. That's also, but that's for wireless. This one is for wired, right? You can see the topology there. 802.1x is a protocol to you know to authenticate, okay, to authenticate a host or endpoint. You can see protocol restrict unauthorized workstation from connecting to a LAN, right? So even, you know, normally when you want to connect to network using wired network, you plug in your cable into the switch, right? So once you connect to the switch, and you can access the network already, right? So if you want to prevent that, then you might want to use a switch that's implementing this IEEE at 02.1x, right? What happens is the authentication server will authenticate each of the workstation that is connecting to the switch port before allowing any further network services, right? That includes running ARP. That means it block the port until that workstation that connects to the port is authenticated via the authentication server. Okay, so this is what we call port-based authentication, right? So we have actors in this kind of protocol. Okay, we have the client, we have the switch, which we have the authentication server. The client or supplicant is the device, right, that runs the the this protocol compliant client software. Is running inside, okay, as part of a service lah, right? Now if you don't have that, there's no way to be authenticated, so you might as well not connect, because you cannot you cannot be authenticated, you will not be able to connect, right? So one of the requirement is for that workstation to have the client software that implements this protocol. Okay, so you can see it's for both wired or wireless devices. Then the authenticator is the device that you connect to, right? Switch, right? We call that authenticator, right? Once you connect, right, it retrieve the sort of authentication information from the supplicant. Then once it gets that, the authenticator contacts the authentication server, providing providing the info, right? And once if it's either valid or invalid, right? It's allowed or not allowed, authorized or not authorized. So depending on the reply from the authentication server, the newly connecting supplicant is either rejected or allowed. Okay. So this is a very good way, a secure way to protect ports on your switch, for example. Okay. Any questions so far?
So far, no.
No. No. Okay. All right. Okay. So let me just check first. We are right here. MAC address table and then tag. Okay. So we'll continue with MAC address table first. Right. Okay. So here we look at triple A. Oh, sorry, not here. Here we start with this first, layer 2 security threats, right? So before this, we look at what kind of security we want to apply onto our network. Now, in this section, we're going to look at what are the security threats facing our network, right? Just now was what security aspect we want to apply to our network. This one, what are the security threats? So we start with layer 2. Okay, so layer 2 Still remember our OSI layers? Okay, we
Oh
learned
yeah.
this, yeah. In the previous course, we start with physical layer and then data link layer, network, transport, session, presentation, application, right? And you can see the division is 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this one is combined. Four for the TCP/IP protocol. So, but this one is OSI, I guess. So session, presentation, application actually combined together as part of application. But we are interested in here, layer 2. Okay, so earlier on, I give you example of your OS level Windows Defender, right? Windows Defender is an application. Yeah, OS also application, right? So that kind of security, endpoint security, is at this layer, right? 7, 8, 6, and 5, correct? Yeah, but now we want to say we want to see what are the threats available at layer 2. Why? Because if an attacker maybe not attacking this layer, application layer, very secure up here, cannot. Okay, Windows Defender doing its job very well. So the attacker attacks from here at the layer 2. Okay, that means when we say attacking here, that means they're accessing the Ethernet frames part. Okay, because the PDU for this layer is frames, right? So since the implemented protocol is Ethernet, so Ethernet frames. So if they are able to compromise this layer, no, that means for IPv4, 3 and 4, there is no protection. Okay, there's no protection here. Okay, in fact, on its own, this layer also no protection. The only protection available is up here actually, right? But once you attack layer 2 and you successfully attack or compromise layer 2, all the upper layers are already compromised. All right, I can tell you that. Once you allow compromise here by your attacker, then no point already. For example, this layer here, no point already. You no matter how you protect here, it's already compromised down here. This also compromised already. Okay, right? So that's the thing, right? Because this is important because most people or most network administrator protect layer 3 up from here up to here, right? You have VPNs, firewall up here, Windows Defender. I've shown you all the list of things, malware, all protected up here, right? In intrusion prevention system, IPS, all this, right? But forgot about layer 2. If layer 2 is compromised, right, then all the protection here no use already. They are all already affected, already compromised, right? Okay, so you can see here, if threat actor access to internal network captured layer 2 frames, capture these frames, then all security implemented up here will be useless already. Okay, the threat actor could cause a lot of damage at this layer, layer 2.
For
Okay.
example, what damage?
We're going to look at soon. We're going to look at in the next. Just to this slide here, just to let you aware, right? Okay. So, but explanation will go to the next slide, right? So, what kind of vulnerabilities do we have? Well, at layer 2, we have the device called switch, right? So when they want to attack layer 2, they attack your switch, right? And layer 2, since there is no built-in security in terms of the frame, okay, implementation, IPv4 layer 3, right? MAC address layer 2, there's no protection mechanism. So first of all, we look at vulnerabilities in terms of the services we have within layer 2, right? Okay, so uh, we look at this table. So these are the category of attack. MAC table attack. So MAC table is the table that switch used to forward frames, right? So example of vulnerability involving MAC table is MAC address flooding attacks. Okay, don't worry, we'll look at it later, right? We just identify first. Then remember VLAN? We create VLAN in our local area network and it involves switches, right? VLAN attack include VLAN hopping. That means even without router on a stick, you can hop between one VLAN to another VLAN. Okay? And VLAN double tagging attack. All right? So again, we'll discuss further later. Next, DHCP attacks. Right? There are two here examples: DHCP starvation and spoofing. DHCP spoofing. Then ARP attacks. Uh, uh, well, we have RP spoofing. Spoofing basically is pretending to be something that you're not, or someone you're not. Then ARP poisoning attack. You poison. Poison means you corrupt the ARP packets here or frames. And then address spoofing attack. And because we have two types of address, physical and logical, MAC address and IP address can be spoofed. And then STP. Remember the STP, the spanning tree protocol, that can also be attacked, right? Spanning tree protocol manipulation attacks. So all the services, it seems like all the services are vulnerable. Okay, these are all involving switch. Switch is a layer 2 device. So all of this, right, are vulnerable, right? So switch attack mitigation techniques, right? We're gonna look at further later. MAC address table attack, right? Switch attack mitigation technique. Um, these are mitigation means you try to stop the those attack. How do you do it, right? So the first one solution is port security. Port security mitigate MAC address flooding attack and DHCP starvation attack. DHCP snooping prevents DHCP starvation and DHCP spoofing attacks. Dynamic ARP inspection or DI, okay, prevents the RP spoofing and ARP poisoning attacks. Finally, IP source guard, IPSG, prevents MAC and IP address spoofing attacks, right? So there's a caveat, right? These solutions are not effective. Even if you implement, it's supposed to mitigate these attacks, but it will not be effective if your management protocols are not secured, right? So management protocols, what does it mean? It means who is the manager? You, the system, the network or system administrator. Management means manage the network device. So in this case, it's switch. So if you do not secure your management protocol, that means when you connect to the switch and you want to do some configuration, then all this no matter it's already that's already a big hole there. This one, even if you specify this, no point, not that effective when your management protocols are not being secured. So to secure a management protocol, you always use secure shell, encrypted version. Don't use telnet. Telnet you can use if you're physically close to your switch, right? You're using console port, you use telnet lah. Can, no problem. Just a normal terminal. Since it's console cable, you're physically there. You don't have man in the middle attack. But if you're enable the remote, you can still use normal terminal, but don't use it anymore if you're using remote access. Use encrypted secure communication, which is SSH. Okay, all should be secure version. So um, secure copy protocol. secure FTP. This one is not SFTP, the simple FTP. This one is the secure FTP. Secure socket layer, transport layer security, SSL, TLS. All these are secure because they are encrypted. They are encrypted. Or they provide authentication, right? Secondly, when it says here, consider using out-of-band management network. Out-of-band management network simply means you are using a management network that is not accessible to other traffic. Okay, the only traffic allowed in that management network is management traffic. In that way, even if you make a mistake, you didn't use any encryption, there's no other access, there's no other traffic, right? It's solely for management, means it's out of band, right? Or you can use the VLAN. You can separate management VLAN from other VLAN. If you're implementing VLAN, right? So you specify, you change from VLAN 1 management to a particular VLAN number. And only that VLAN is only for management traffic also, right? So this one is physical, this one is virtual, right? And finally, you can use this feature is available, okay, on I don't I don't if I recall, yeah, it's available on switches. This is access control list. You are basically allowing what which uh I'm not sure whether it's on router or switches. I have to check later. But this configure which host allowed to send what application protocol you're filtering it. Okay, so it makes it harder for threat actors to actually send messages inside the network, because you filter and you disallow any protocol that is not if this filter detect, let's say you disallow, let's say ping, right, ping protocol ICMP, let's say then whenever it sees ICMP, it blocks. It only allow what you allow to pass through, what kind of protocol or what kind of you know, it can detect that. So ACL is used, and this can filter unwanted access, right? Okay, so let's look at MAC address table attack. So MAC address table is updated dynamically, right, by the switch. Remember, this might be one of the questions that come out in the exam. The frame ingress into the switch, right? So the switch purpose is to forward that frame. But how does the switch know which port to forward through? By checking its MAC address table. Okay, if it can identify the destination MAC address inside its MAC address table, then it will know which port it should forward to. If it doesn't know, then there's no choice. It will have to forward to all the ports except the ingress port. Okay, so that's the operation of the switch on this MAC address table. You guys still remember?
Oh yeah.
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 Okay. So the MAC address table is a table because all our computing devices are based on von Neumann machine concept, right? Whereby program and data that needs to be operated on, okay, must reside in main memory. Okay, it's a stored program computation. So, meaning to say, our MAC address table, in order for it to be utilized by the switch, must be stored in the switch memory, right? Okay. Right, so let's look at the first vulnerability. It's called the MAC address table flooding. What does it mean? Well, it's simply the nature of our RAM, our memory. One of the characteristic about our RAM, whether it's on a switch, router, or our PC, is what? It's limited in, is finite in size, right? It's limited in size. Correct? That's why here it says the Mac tables has a fixed size because the RAM is stored in is fixed size. So, which what does it imply? It implies that it can run out of space, right? RAM as a RAM. Mac tables to be able to be operated by the switch to do the switching algorithm has to be loaded in RAM, thereby implying it has a fixed size because your RAM is fixed size, thereby implying you may run out of space. Your table can be filled to capacity. In normal everyday situation, this is very difficult to achieve because the number of ports you have, then the number of the tables that you have equal to the number of ports you have should be sufficient, right? But the the attacker is sending, right? Sending frames. Bombarding means simply means spamming, right? Sending so many frames into the switch. And the thing is, uh, the attacker software is able to embed fake source MAC address, right, as part of the um, you know the MAC address within that frame header. So what happens when when the switch see MAC address that is not inside its table? As part of its dynamic update of the table, what does it do?
It update as a new MAC
Yes, it
address.
will
Mm.
and create a new entry. Correct, Noel. It will create a new entry. And since the attacker is bombarding the switch with all these frames, and all these frame has fake MAC addresses, well, what the switch is to say, oh, you know, new address. I have to update my MAC address table. So it's keep inserting, entering until it reach capacity, until it's full, right? When what happens when the address table is full? Well, the the switch cannot update. So the switch will treat the frame as an unknown unicast. Means it is not in the frame, so it cannot add anymore because it's full. So what happened? Since it cannot update, it cannot recognize, it will flood. It will broadcast. It will perform broadcast, right? So you can see it begins to flood all incoming traffic or all ports, means it start to broadcast, right? No longer referencing MAC table because MAC, this is um, the way the algorithm works with switches with the MAC table. So MAC table full no longer reference that. So when you receive unknown doesn't identify the frame anymore. It cannot check the MAC table because it's full already. It just flood. Okay, this is basically the default action, right? Now, what happens when you flood? So this condition allows the threat actor. Threat actor is maybe the hacker. We don't call it hacker. We call it threat actor, right? That it will be able to capture all the frames sent from one host to another on the local LAN or local VLAN. Why? Because imagine other host is also sending messages. The threat actor connects to the switch, purposely filling up the, well, using the fake frame with MAC address, fake MAC address, filling up the table until full. So now when it's full, the switch operates in broadcast mode. So broadcast mode means whenever it's receive any frames, it will just broadcast. So that means not only from the attacker machine, but also from other hosts straight away. Now, no longer unicast, right? It will be broadcast. So now here, there's a listening or capturing software like Wireshark. Remember, I introduced Wireshark to you guys? It operates very similar to simulation mode in your packet tracer where you can capture, yeah, capture frames, right?
Oh,
And when you can capture frames, you can look inside, right? Inside, you can open up the frames data inside there. Open inside, right? And now you can get any other host frames because they are now broadcast and your port will also receive it. Then, so that means you can receive other host frames. Maybe not intended for you, but since the switch now operates in broadcast mode, then you receive it anyway. Then you can capture and you can start logging in, log, right? Capture all the frames. Okay. Of course, inside the frames will be layer 3, layer 4, layer all the upper layer information, PDUs, right? Is the data of the frame. That's it. You can get it all already.
so this attack can only be performed inside the LAN.
Yeah. Once you're able to connect, or you can take
Oh,
over. This can be either the legitimate workstation connected, and somehow the threat actor able to compromise, able to come in. Now, not physically there. I can just show you an example. This one is connected to internet remotely, right? And the user here accidentally click or unintentionally click whatever. Now, uh, this machine is sending maybe password, user, whatever, right? So the threat actor remotely can access this and remote control this machine. Not necessarily this threat actor is physically there or physically bring his own machine to connect to the port. Can happen like that, right? So when he's here, okay, he can now use the software or a software which now he can transfer or was transferred earlier on to flood this local switch, because now he's like a how to say this just like when you are using VPN software to log into internal network, right? So now you're as if you're in this private network. So similar thing. Once you are able to penetrate here, right? Grab hold of this. Okay. Of course, you can do this physically present. Okay, physically present uh, locally, but can also be remotely present. So once the threat actor have access to this PC, he can just flood this. When this is flooded, is full, then this switch will this is the standard way to call it is when it's full is overflow. So then this switch operates in broadcast mode. So now all the other the previously uncompromised machine is now compromised because whatever they're sending could be local. You trust the data in local, right? So it could be running unencrypted, right? You can maybe get internal messages, internal IMs, which is not encrypted, right? You can maybe have email, right, or whatever. So all captured here, and again forwarded out to remotely, right? The vulnerability here is this action by the switch when it's flooded, MAC address table flooding problem, right?
oh,
So there is a software called one of the software example is Mac OF, right? This is a tool. It's very dangerous because they can create a MAC table overflow attack quickly. Excuse me. For example, a Catalyst 6500 switch actually can store. You can see that it's not supposed to overflow, because imagine it can store up to 132,000 MAC address in the capacity of its MAC address table. But using this malware, this software is you know, the threat actor always have a set of application or tools software, right? Your bag of tricks lah. So Mac OS can flood the switch with up to 8,000 fake bogus frames per second. So in a matter of few seconds, that switch straight away will be overflow. Right? So they are not only affecting local switch, they also affect other connected layer 2 switch, because it works in broadcast mode. What if the frame that was broadcasted is also the fake? Now is now when this switch is full, it start broadcasting, and it start broadcasting all those fake frames, and it will reach other switches, and those switches also will start filling up their tables, right? So to mitigate MAC address table overflow attacks, you use port security. Simply do not allow this to connect to. That means if physically you connect, the port security will detect that it's not a valid computer, right? Valid computer means allowed computer. But remember, I said that this person might be able to compromise this, whether they are local or remote. So in the first place, how they can compromise, that's why it's here. This one is mentioned here, right? Never protect your authentication very, very carefully. You protect traffic that the user can access outside on the internet, right? So that you can prevent any malware in the first place to be downloaded into the user machine, which can create that vulnerability. Okay, you don't want to allow someone to zombify your machine. That means take over your machine. Take over your machine, right? That's a different other security aspect, right? So for the port security, simply means that when you're basically provide protection against identification of the workstation connecting to the port on the switch, right? Right. So there will be some further details on port security later, right? I think on the next chapter, right? Port security chapter, or switch securities chapter. All right. Okay. All right. So now let's have a look at LAN attacks. LAN attacks is still layer 2, because LAN is basically layer 2. So I'm going to switch over. Maybe I'll show you this this video, right? Okay, so I'm going to stop. Wait, stop that. Stop here, and share with you this one. Let me know if you can hear this.
A VLAN hopping attack is going to enable traffic from one virtual local area network to be seen by another virtual local area network. And this is without the aid of a device such as a router. This is a basic VLAN hopping attack. A threat actor is going to configure a host to act just like a switch. And then using that host, they're going to take advantage of the automatic trunking port feature that's enabled by default on most switch ports. This would be the modes of dynamic auto or dynamic desirable on the switch ports. The threat actor is going to configure the host to spoof those 802.1q signaling and those Dhcp messages so that the trunk will form between the host and the switch. With a successful trunk established, they're going to be able to send and receive traffic on any virtual local area network, effectively hopping between any VLANs that they want to connect through. With a VLAN double tagging attack, a threat actor is going to embed a hidden 802.1q VLAN tag inside of a frame that already has an 802.1q VLAN tag. What's going to happen here is we're going to have an attacker that's going to double tag a frame. For example, our attacker was going to build a message that's going to communicate from its current VLAN, which is VLAN 10, with a targeted VLAN of VLAN 20. With the attacker currently being on VLAN 10, they're going to build a frame that's going to have an external VLAN header on it of VLAN 10, and then an internal tagged VLAN of VLAN 20. When that message is sent up to the first switch, our first switch is going to see the external outside header of VLAN 10. It's going to strip that off and then send this traffic on its way to any device running in VLAN 10. Well, the switch sees that VLAN 10 is also the native VLAN, so it's going to remove the VLAN 10 header and move it across the trunk link. Now, as that frame moves across the trunk link, the first header of VLAN 10 was removed. And now the internal tag, which is the VLAN 20, it still exists. This second switch is going to receive that frame, it's going to strip off that VLAN 20 header, and then it's going to forward it out any VLAN 20 ports, which includes down to that targeted host. This is effectively allowing our threat actor machine on VLAN 10 to communicate to the target on VLAN 20 using a double tag. Now, VLAN hopping and this whole idea of VLAN double tagging, they can both be prevented by putting in a couple security guidelines. Number one, we should get rid of trunking on any access port that goes to end devices. Also, the whole idea of auto trunking, using things like dynamic desirable and dynamic auto, that should be disabled. We should use a manual static trunking as needed. Also, native VLAN should only be used on trunk links, and that native VLAN should never span to a user device. For instance, in this scenario only works when the threat actor is on the same VLAN as the native VLAN between our switches. Dhcp is a powerful tool for easy dynamic addressing across our networks, but it can also be a powerful tool for malicious threat actors that want to have some fun with a network. So, quick recap of Dhcp. We have Dhcp servers that are going to dynamically provide addressing for us. That addressing includes IP addresses, subnet mask, default gateway, DNS servers, and even more with Dhcp options to our clients. The typical conversation with Dhcp goes back to DORA. Discover, offer, request, acknowledge. Our client's going to send a broadcast message, which is a discover. A server is going to hear that broadcast message and respond with a unicast offer of, this is what I can give ya. Here's some addressing info. The client receives that offer, it's very excited, and it sends out a broadcast of, I accept the offer you sent me. That server finishes it up with a unicast saying, you like the offer, I'm glad. I acknowledge. And then the lease is complete regarding the client taking that addressing info. It sounds easy enough, but now let's bring in an attack. Now it sounds funny saying it, but there's two common types of Dhcp attacks. We've got the Dhcp Starvation attack and Dhcp spoofing. With Dhcp Starvation, the goal of the threat actor is to create a denial of service for your connecting clients. What would happen is the threat actor would gobble up all of the usable Dhcp provided addresses. The easiest way to go about this is having a threat actor using a client machine that's cycling through source MAC addresses very quickly, and for each source MAC address, gobbling up an available IP address being given by your Dhcp server. When all the addresses are taken from the Dhcp server, there's nothing to provide the legitimate clients. On top of that, there's the Dhcp spoofing attack. Imagine having a threat actor putting out their own Dhcp server on your network. And when your clients use the whole DORA process and they broadcast out for a discover, and then there's the offer, the request, but then your rogue Dhcp server finishes the conversation with the client with an acknowledgement providing wrong default gateway info, incorrect DNS servers, as well as even wrong IP addresses for the clients to use. Effectively, your legitimate clients cannot communicate on the network. So we have to prevent this by using safeguards and implementations for security.
All right, so that was the kind of a video you can get from your uh, Net Academy. Okay, so that's why I always ask you guys to um, as much as possible, try to utilize your what lah, okay, your Net Acad. All right, so
A VLAN hopping attack
sorry.
is going to enable traffic from one virtual
Let
local
me
area
just
network to be seen by another virtual local area network.
I
And
think
this is
it's
without
keep
the aid of
playing. All right, let me stop that first. All right. So what we've seen was VLAN attack and DHCP attack. So each for VLAN we have the hopping and double tagging attack. Both try to send messages between VLANs, okay, without the use of the router. Okay, and the second one, the starvation is basically preventing um, both also can be preventing a client computer from getting correct IP address or and also other information, right? The starvation and spoofing. So um, let's have a look at that from the video just now. So hopping attack, hopping between VLAN, right? So that means uh, ideally when you have two VLANs, for example, and without any router, the traffic is confined to each VLAN only. So let's say you have VLAN 1, you have VLAN 10, VLAN 20. So traffic within VLAN 10 is confined to VLAN 10. Only uh, clients or hosts belonging to VLAN 10 can speak to each other. And vice versa in VLAN 20, only um, hosts belonging to VLAN 20 can speak to other hosts within that VLAN 20. Right? Hopping means you are allowing traffic from one VLAN 10 to travel to VLAN 20 and vice versa. Usually, if you intend to do this, the proper way is to use router, right? And then the router is the one that's going to allow communication between the two VLANs, right? Okay. So how does it work? Okay, so configuring host to spoof this at 02.1q. Remember this protocol. This protocol is actually a protocol used by the router, right? Router on the stick, right? At 02.1q, right? So and also uh, it's used as part of the trunking protocol. Remember, we allow single link to deliver multiple VLANs. So if you can basically fake this or spoof this one at 02.1q, suddenly the switch will allow um, other VLANs to travel with the link rather than just one single link. All right. So for example, this machine also act as a switch lah, which means it enables at 02.1q. If you don't put that as access mode, you allow misconfiguration again lah. If you allow this one to be trunking port, right? Maybe you allow desirable or auto. So if I set here, right, as the endpoint also enabling F02.1Q protocol, okay, and I put as desirable. If this is auto, I put desirable, or this is desirable, I put desirable. Suddenly, the switch will want to communicate with this machine as trunk. Okay. Now, depending on the trunk is configured because it can allow multiple VLANs. So, if this was misconfigured as a trunk port allowing well a set of VLANs, then here you can also set the same. Now you can then get traffic, okay, from all the set, okay, the VLAN belonging to the set. So VLAN 10, VLAN 20, for example, right? Okay. So this actually can only happen if you misconfigured this as trunk port rather than access port. Access port, there's no at 02.1 queue, right? Okay.
The end device still can function even though it's a trunk.
Oh yeah, because your end device go all the way to layer 7, including layer 2. So basically, you have a software that acts as if it's a switch or partial of the switch where you enable at 02.1 queue. Remember, any device can reach up to layer 7 because it can do whatever feature in whichever layer. It's just that whether you have the software or not. So if I can actually make my PC as a switch, okay? The only thing is, do I have ports, right? Because I can run a switch application, or I can become a router, right? Because I can run router software, right? So if I'm a threat actor and I'm very good in programming, I know this protocol, so I create an application that acts as if a switch implementing trunk at 02.1 queue protocol. Then the switch doesn't know, right? It just see that, oh, you are another switch with that protocol. So if desirable is set here or auto, I can set desirable here. My software will start sending the at 02.1 queue protocol to negotiate to enable trunk mode. Okay, remember, if this is auto, desirable auto, or if this is desirable, straight away this one become a trunk link. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah, pretending to be, right? Pretending to be a switch. That's why it's spoof at 02.1 queue. Typically, only switch will use at 02.1 queue protocol. But since your device is powerful, can go all the way up to layer 7. So layer 2 protocols can be run in your machine. Remember? Right. Okay. Whatever devices within whatever layer your machine can duplicate, can run the service, can run the software, right? Okay, because uh, basically all the way to layer 7 can do anything, right? Whereas a switch only up to layer 2 or maybe layer 3 for the Cisco switches, router up to layer 3, okay? Right? Right, so the second way is double tagging. So just as explained in the video, is basically Vlan to be tagged to cross over the trunk link. Actually, you tag it with S02.1 queue tag. That's how you can do multiple VLAN traffic within the same link, right? Based on the tag, then the switch is know how to forward your frame to the correct VLAN, okay, to the correct access port to connect to the what, right, to the host, okay, and each host is connected to VLAN based on the access port VLAN specification, right? And the switch uses the at 02.1 queue tag to identify that frame belongs to which VLAN. Okay, so here, if the threat actor machine is on the same VLAN and which is the native VLAN as well, then by adding another tag, which is different from the first tag, that means just now the example was VLAN 10, VLAN 20, right? The VLAN 10 is used to cross over the switch. And then on the switch side, where it connects to host, the second tag is identified, and it will use that tag to forward that frame to a different to a machine in a different VLAN. right? Okay.
So
So that's basically then from VLAN 10, it can go to VLAN 20, right?
okay.
Yeah. So you can see step by step here how that happens, right? So that's VLAN double tagging attack, right? So unidirectional and works is only one way. That means only sending and receiving is not, because when it reply, the machine is valid machine. It doesn't do the double tagging. Only the original or originating machine, which is the threat actor machine, can manipulate the frame so that can double tag the frame. Okay, but reply will not be double tag. So it's a unidirectional uh, kind of attack lah, right? So how to mitigate? Well, the first attack, the hopping one, right? Depending on the trunk port set to connect to host. So if you change that trunk port into access port, then it disables the S01 point this protocol lah, right? S02.1Q, right? Because you disable the trunking, so there's no S01 S02.1Q, right? So remember, always set access port on the port linking to host, right? Disable the auto trunking on trunk links. So the trunks must be manually enabled. Be sure that your native VLAN is only used for trunk links, not on access port, right? Okay.
That means the attacker can modify the frame.
Yeah. The attacker,
Oh,
where the frame originate from the attacker machine, where the frame originate from, the attacker, of course, can modify the frame. Again, modifying the frame at layer 2, you can write an app to do that. Okay. That means you have to be very good lah, right? But sometimes nowadays people use program written by other people. Other people who are expert, they can write the program. An attacker can simply download the program and use it without knowing how to program. Okay, and most of the time, attackers are like this. Not everybody is good enough in programming to be able to. Well, actually, if you think about it, it's not that hard to program. All you need to do is able to grab the frame. Okay, and in the creation of the frame is, if you know the header and the process of creating the frame, what's inside the header, what's inside the trailer, right? So if you are able to create the frame, you can easily insert the tag, okay, the tag as part of the header of the frame. So yeah, maybe you need some skills, like programming skills, a little bit, especially low-level programming skill, right? Dealing with bits and fields. But you can also write a high-level language using C, maybe C++, okay, where you can create the frame actually, right? Okay,
oh,
doing it is not that hard. Okay, but fortunately, preventing it also not that hard also. Okay, this one, VLAN attack mitigation. So just follow the standard good practices, okay, to avoid. So basically, don't use trunk link on ports that connect to hosts. So then there's no S01 being used. And be sure the native VLAN is only used on trunk links and not on access port. Okay, right. So the next part is the DHCP messages, right? So we already learned about DHCP. This is dynamic host configuration protocol. If you don't want to set all the IP, DNS, and gateway addresses manually, you can use DHCP. And this is basically what most wireless network use. Your wireless phone, basically, if you want to connect to Wi-Fi, right? it will use DHCP to get the list from the DHCP server to get the IP address, because it's very troublesome for Wi-Fi. You connect, disconnect. Every time you have to set the correct IP address. So this is an automatic way to get the correct addresses, IP address, gateway address, and also DNS server address configuration rather than manually, right? Okay, manually doing this. So that means this can happen on wired and wireless network. Okay, this kind of LAN attack, because wireless also is LAN, right? So the starvation. Before we talk to about the starvation, this is a reminder, the DORA. Remember, I asked you guys to, if you study DHCP, if you forgot what's the step, just remember DORA the Explorer. Okay, D stands for discover, O for offer, R for request, and then A for acknowledge. So this is the step, right? I think you guys will remember back, right? Okay, so what is the attack? A starvation. Okay, starvation simply means you take up, as an attacker, you take up all the IP address. Remember, the DHCP server has a list of address pool. Okay, so the idea is, if one computer asks for an IP address, then the DHCP server take one IP address from the pool and assign a list. That means a list is simply means you will use that IP address for the period of time I allow you to use, and that is a list lah. Like you rent your contract 1 year, for example, or your contract for 2 years, you rent the house or room. So similarly, you rent the IP address for a period of time, maybe 1 day, or sometimes it's infinite lah, right? It depends on how you configure the DHCP. Starvation means I want to get all the IP address within the IP address pool of the DHCP server. How do I do that? Well, I bombard it with requests, right? With a request, and each request have a fake MAC address. So, and I keep changing my MAC address. I send my MAC address different. I get the IP. Keep getting. I got all the address by doing that, because the DHCP server, as it allocates one list out, then it reduced by one until there is no more IP address in its pool of IP address, right? And it can be done very quickly. So then other legitimate machine want to get IP address, cannot get, because no more IP address. That's called DHCP starvation attack. It means the legitimate machine is starved of IP address. There's no more, because all IP address allocated to the attacker. How you get? Because he keep requests with a different MAC address, right? And the DHCP just, okay, I give you until finish, no more, right? Is that okay for this one, starvation attack?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one is the spoofing attack. Now this one, you basically, as I mentioned before, DHCP as a server is actually a layer 7 application, right? So you can download a DHCP server and install in your computer. So what happened is there's already a DHCP, and the way it's designed is there's actually, as an administrator, you can have more than one DHCP server. This is for redundancy, and also for load balancing. So not only one DHCP server have to service the network. Another one can be set up to service. But for legitimate use, you already configured that this DHCP is responsible for this range of address. This is DHCP responsible for this range of address. That's how you divide the work lah, right? But what happens if I introduce, let's say I'm a threat actor. I introduce a fake DHCP server, right? So instead of the legitimate user getting IP address from the legitimate DHCP server, they're getting from me. And what if I'm you know, I don't want to give them the correct one, I also give them the fake one. Okay, I take over the job of other DHCP server, then, you know, then all the info I give is all fake also, not working. So again, it's the denial of service. Worse, I point it to another, to a machine, that the machine is spoofing another machine, right? So I can do a lot of things lah. So this is called spoofing, because this DHCP server is pretending to be a valid or legal DHCP server, whereas it's actually a fake one, right? And it's returning possibly wrong information, like wrong default gateway, wrong DNS server, wrong IP address. So once you try to connect, actually you got it, but when you try to connect, cannot connect because these are fake ones. All right, not part of the proper configured IP address. Okay, so this is the DHCP spoofing attack.
Connect means connect remotely.
Yeah, can be remotely, can be local, but actually it's local. It's LAN attack, because you know what? I intercept. I take over when I detect someone asking for DHCP, right? I straight away go and send to you and send acknowledge. I take over. I take over lah. I take over the function of the other DHCP server.
Oh,
Okay. All right. Oh, okay. So I think we'll stop here, right? And next will be further attacks, ARP attack, STP attack, and CDP reconnaissance. But we're gonna continue that in next week, lah. Right?
okay.
Okay. So next week we'll cover the remaining and also the switch security. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna stop recording now. Okay. All right. So I think that's it. Thank you everyone for today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right.